we welcome you into another edition of the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead Show. We are at Quaker Steak and Lube, and once again, the dear Goon's voice just not cooperating these days, and so Chris Bucanati kind enough to again fill in for the beloved Goon.
This is like a running subplot we've created on this show: the mystery of the Goon's disappearing, reappearing, disappearing again voice. You can't be on a talk show if you can't talk. It's a crucial part of the job description.
Very important element, to be sure. Yeah, a lot of things you can get away with, but not being able to talk is not one of them.
Indeed. If you're worried about the big guy, he's fine. He's feeling fine.
It's all relative.
Relative.
Yeah.
It's relatively speaking. But just when he moves his lips, the sound doesn't come out. So,
man,
I am trying to capably fill in.
And that you will do undoubtedly.
What's
to get into today.
What's a Pittsburgh Steelers analogy for the oft turned to but capable backup?
Boy, that is a good.
Because I mean, I feel like Charlie Batch didn't play enough, right?
Yeah,
you could always count on Chaz Batch to come in and win your game when you needed him to, but
yeah. Oh man, that's a good.
Who filled in?
They've
Eric Pegram. I don't know. I'm the Eric Pegram of the Goon and Ironhead show.
There you go.
I always liked Eric Pegram.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I gravitate to those role players because I was never the best athlete, right? So I appreciated guys who, once they got to the pros, they were a superstar at one point.
Yes,
and had to adjust to the fact that they were now just mere mortals compared to the superhumans they were playing alongside. I love those guys. I always liked the role players, the NBA sixth man, the defensive specialist. I always appreciated those guys, the special teams gunners.
Yes. I was debating on and just crazy weather, and looks like it's going to be actually pretty nice for the blue-white game on Saturday, which is, given what we've been dealing with today and yesterday, amazing. But
for those of you outside the market, it fucking snowed here over the last 2 days. It's stuck on the ground. It was crazy. It's almost gone already.
Yeah, it truly just unreal. But it does sound like it's going to be nice going into the weekend, and very nice for the game itself on Saturday. Darn near perfect if the weather holds true to what is being forecast at the moment, where it's not going to be too hot either. It's just going to be really nice, comfortable football, 70-ish, high 60s.
God, it would be great. Holds.
And no precipitation. The whole bit. It'd be wonderful. Wonderful for the fans, wonderful for the players. I do think that there is I think there's excitement for the blue-white game this year, just because I think people just want to get a feel, some kind of a feel. And again, I don't know what kind of a feel we're actually going to get, but you just want to see some of these guys and kind of where they're at, familiarize yourself with some of the players that could be making an impact in the upcoming season. Some of the guys that were highly touted, coming out of high school, and that, we haven't seen a lot of to this point, along with obviously trying to gauge to whatever degree you can some of the progress of the veterans that are returning. But I do think there's a lot of and the weather is certainly going to help. But I think there's a lot of juice for the blue-white game. The fact that we're going to be able to tailgate without masks, go into the stands without masks, to just have that so-called normal vibe around a blue-white game, and be able to take the kiddos up to it and the whole bit, I think is going to be fun. And again, I don't know how much you actually learn, but it's just fun to at least, let's see some of the one-on-one matchups that you might be able to see, and just, again, get some sort of a feel for the progress and where this team stands at this stage of the game. And listen, it's football. It's a taste of football. all deference to the USFL. This is real football that we get to see live and in person.
Don't forget the user-controlled football league or
Yes.
whatever that league is, where Terrell Owens just scored a touchdown this past weekend.
Yes,
that was whoever managed to coax him out of retirement to play, at least one game for them.
Yep.
That was a brilliant, I imagine was a very fixed budget marketing move, because I never would have heard of that league otherwise.
No.
But at least I'm not aware it exists.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the name of the game, right? Get your name out there, get some headlines made, and then you go from there. A few things. Did you watch any of the E60 thing last night?
No.
I ended up, so I need to make a small caveat.
Big win for the Sixers.
Just a couple
up
of
2-0
quick
the
comments.
Raptors. Big win.
Not only up 2-0, dominating 2-0, and
I mean, half the Raptors roster was out, but you know what? You got to play who shows up to play.
But
and when you have the advantage, you got to press it.
Yeah, and take advantage of it, right? And that is, again, that's what you're supposed to do if you're a team like the Sixers. It was funny. I was listening to some discussion yesterday nationally, and I did not watch any of the Sixers game, full disclosure. I'm actually watching a little more of the Pirates than I thought I would, which will lead me to the next discussion point. But I was listening to one talk show, and they were the one host was kind of bashing James Harden. It's like, well, he just never puts up playoff numbers, and the numbers are not good. They're very average, very pedestrian for James Harden, for a talent like James Harden. But then I was listening to what I thought was a more in-depth discussion this morning. It's like, no, this dude is doing exactly what the Sixers are asking him to do, and his passing skills are what is critical right now. When you get into the playoffs, and not trying to do too much is exactly what the Sixers need from him when you have the guys that this roster now has. You can't have him, lay a goose egg or go for 10 points, but getting 20 points and distributing the ball, that you're perfectly content with that if you're a Sixers fan. And I bring it up only because it is just interesting to me. And again, I'm not an NBA guy. I used to be. I don't follow it. Haven't followed it in a long time. And that being said, the Sixers, as they go along, I will end up, I suspect, checking them out.
I hope they hang around long enough to give you the opportunity.
Well, and as a kid, I was a huge Sixers fan, and Dr. J is what drew me in, and obviously with no basketball team in Pittsburgh, the Sixers were the team I followed, and that is the team that with the Maurice Cheeks. There was probably a 7-8 year period there where, I really was into basketball.
Sure.
And the Sixers were a big deal, and it was fun. And we'd be out in our driveway playing ball, and it's like today I'm Maurice Cheeks. Tomorrow I'm Dr. J. Whatever. And it was fun. But you followed that team pretty closely. I think if you were in Pennsylvania,
you probably
late
know
70s,
this.
early 80s.
I'll be a little bit surprised if you didn't know this, but you're aware that Nick Dawkins, the offensive lineman for Penn State, that is Darryl Dawkins' son.
Yeah, so a quick story about that. Yes, I don't know that I did know it. I think I had heard it somewhere along the way. I was aware of it. My wife's foundation, the Jana Marie Foundation, had an event that and I always get this wrong. Is it RPM students?
ARPM.
ARPM. Thank you. Were involved in, and that is, and Nick, Aaron Brooks, and Keaton Ellis were the three student athletes at this particular event out at, I still think of it as the Park Forest Junior High School, now the Park Forest Middle School, but they were there, and Nick was really gracious with his time with the kids, but we were talking, and he was hanging out with Reg, and we were talking a little bit about his dad's career. And Nick, and I've never heard this, so I guess it's all just perception, because in my eyes as a kid, I mean, Dawkins was bigger than life, and the whole Chocolate Thunder. I mean, he was a huge deal. And Nick was saying that there's a lot of people that still perceive his career as being disappointing, meaning his dad, Daryl Dawkins' career, because they were comparing him to like the Wilt Chamberlains
right.
And I'm like, well, that's, I mean, okay, fair enough. If you're, your point is he wasn't Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Wilt Chamberlain, okay,
right?
I mean, but. My God, you're talking about one of the, I don't know, and I haven't sat down and thought about this, but he's probably one of the 20 best big men, right? And if I'm wrong about that, don't. But I mean, he was great. I mean, it's the point. And he played a long time and was very productive in the NBA, which is, arguably the greatest league in terms of just the top end athleticism.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, it's a star-driven league, and his name and his reputation.
Everybody knows
that is a very, very exclusive group.
But yeah, so it's just funny to listen to him talk about it. And obviously, he reveres his father, and I told him, I'm like, no, like when I was a kid, I mean. Yeah, your dad was one of the guys that was like what you dreamed about as a kid in Pennsylvania. So
yeah, man, those damn
and I will
Kareem
say,
Magic Lakers teams.
Yeah,
they should have had a couple more rings than they got. That group.
Yep, I agreed. And Nick, by the way, is a pretty impressive. Just looking at him, individual. My wife's like. I knew he was big. I mean, I get it, but like he's huge. I'm like, well, yeah, he is, and obviously just a terrific athlete and terrific lineage. But yeah, very impressive individual. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for the Sixers to do well, but it's funny when we overanalyze, and I'm guilty as anybody, but it's like sports is so much more than numbers, and that's kind of where I was going. Is again, the one guy was just looking at the numbers. Is like, well, he averaged 24 points, throughout the season, and I'm making up the numbers. And now he's averaging 22. You need your stars to rise in the playoffs, and it's one of those things where we just have become, I think, too numbers obsessed. And with fantasy leagues and all of that, I mean, it's understandable from the fan perspective. But like real football people, like coaches and other players in football, basketball, baseball, like there is so much more than how many home runs you hit. Even getting on base, laying down an effective bunt that gets 2 runs in for you eventually, like that is huge.
I saw a crazy stat earlier this week that makes me think of exactly that. Tony Gwynn had fewer strikeouts in the last 12 years of his career than Aaron Judge did his rookie season.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. That's man.
I mean, that's like
crazy.
Opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But there's just so many things that go into, and I know there was a group that would always roll their eyes when Joe Materno would talk about, I'm not going to play that running back until he blocks well. But, man, if you are a quarterback and you understand the importance of picking up that blitz,
right.
It's like, yeah, it is awesome that you can run for 200 yards, and that is a really important element of being a running back for sure. But, man, if your responsibility is, and you consistently miss it, to pick up that blitzing linebacker to give the quarterback the extra half second to get the ball downfield when you need it, and you can't do that. Right? Like, that is a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's not one that, again, a lot of the average fans and, the fantasy nuts are going to pay any attention to, but it is, an example of stuff that is really vital. And
anyways, will make or break your career at the next level if you have the talent to play in the NFL. If you can't block, you're done.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear, though, with the James Harden discussion. The guys I was listening to this morning, we're just kind of breaking it down a little more, and it's like,
yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
This guy,
where he's at right now with this team,
completely gets what he's supposed to be doing now with this team and what his role is, and he's doing it exactly the way they need him to do it. And
now, at one point or another over the course of the postseason, if, as I said, they last long enough to latch you in and get you watching the second round of the conference finals, my lips to God's ears. At one point, we know Tobias Harris is not a reliable scorer. Tyrese Maxey is really coming into his own, but he's a young kid. He's going to have an off night, and that's when you're really going to need the veteran presence, and Harden is going to have to step up. And based on the way he played down the stretch, I think there's fair questions about whether or not he's going to be there to do it.
Right.
But right now, with everything clicking the way it's supposed to be, he is playing an ideal role for this Sixers team. At one point or another, there's going to be a night where they need him to look a little bit more like old school volume scorer James Harden, and we'll see whether or not he rises to that opportunity when it presents itself.
Yeah.
But for now, they do not need, nor frankly do they want him to be filling up the stat sheet the way he did maybe at the peak of his scoring output back in the Houston Rockets days. And how much did that team win at the highest level?
Well, and
how many rings does he have?
Yeah, exactly. And that's at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that go into any team winning a championship, and understanding your role, and when you need to step up, and again, different games, different series call for different things, right? I mean, we talk about this all the time. Matchups matter when it comes to the postseason in any of these sports, and that is part of the luck element too, right? Is hey, man, I'm glad we got this team, not that team, because we match up better with this team, and now we can get past this one, even though one team may be better overall. It's it's sometimes just how the matchups work out for your team or any team, but. So we'll see what happens with the Sixers. Easter Sunday got into a conversation. Listen, miracle, right? Easter, all about miracles. Is the greater miracle that he has risen, or that the Pittsburgh Pirates are on Easter Sunday we're above 500 on the season? And I think it's a fair debate myself. I'm kidding about that, but okay. I am stunned that even 2 weeks in, we are,
man, right?
I get it, and I don't listen. I completely have the realistic goggles on. I know where this thing ends.
Sure,
for the Pirates this season, but I am here to tell you, I didn't think this team would be 500.
You thought they'd have like 2 wins at this point?
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, do I think? There's a couple of things I will say. I do like the grit that this team is showing. I do like I think Shelton is the right manager for this team. I thought Clint Hurdle was the right manager for the Pirates for the years he was question. There. But
no doubt.
I do like it was time for a change at the time, and I still love Hurdle. But I think Shelton, there's that accountability there, and I liked that he owned up last night. And I don't know that it was necessarily a mistake leaving the starter and giving up the grand slam. You could feel it getting away a little bit, but you don't. Again, if there's a fly out there, like nobody's giving that a second thought. And that's,
isn't this
again,
early in the
of
season?
sports.
Isn't that when you want to let those guys have a little bit longer
That's
tether?
exactly, yeah. So, I have no qualms. I really don't with the – and listen, I'm also tend to be, so maybe I should have qualms. I tend to be the old school guy. I want my starting pitcher to be in there for 5+. Yeah, if it's
right.
a night,
I'm with you.
If it's an obvious day or night where he just doesn't have it, I mean, he's getting shelled for 5 runs in the first inning and he can't find the strike zone. Yes, I mean, there's exceptions to the rule. But listen, up until it's a 2-1 game. And bases are loaded and the whole bit, but I don't know. I didn't have any problem with it whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to
but he owned up.
He's
like, no, that was my decision. And in retrospect, probably not the right decision. Well, that's fantastic. Every decision that leads to another team scoring in any sport. Well, we should have done something different. Well. Okay.
You're going to have to ride with these guys over the course of a long season. And early on, I think you want to let them know that you're going to have the faith in them to let them try to figure it out.
Yeah.
I think for 2 reasons. Number one, you want to have the player understand that you as a manager have faith in them as one of your starters. And you also want to see how they do in those situations. It's a little bit of a laboratory environment in April. And you want to see how he does in that situation. Does he give up the grand slam or does he figure out a way out of the inning? So, I agree with you. I'm with you there totally. Plus, again, when you're managing the Pirates and you're anywhere near 500, you're playing with complete house money, right?
this is
and I don't care what month of the year it is.
And again, listen, I'm not here to tell you I expect the Pirates. I know the Pirates are not going to be contenders this year. I'm just telling you, it's been a fun couple of weeks to start the season. I didn't think we're going to have a fun day, let alone a couple of weeks as a
Alan keeps side-eyeing me from the bar here at Quaker Steak and Lube because he's waiting for me to bring up how the much more highly paid Philadelphia Phillies roster at 4-7 is looking right now.
But
not
listen,
so good.
Again, it's
Alan,
baseball.
the city's giving all its mojo to the 76ers right now. We only got so much to spread around. It's very important right now. It's Yes. The goodwill is being sent to Howie Roseman and Doc Rivers and the 76ers.
Yeah.
It's a long season for the Phillies.
And there's a lot of things that I'm interested in with the NFL draft to follow up with
Ironhead.
that.
I cannot wait to come on here next week and just drive you guys insane with the minutia of the NFL draft. Goon knows nothing I love more to talk about at this time of year, frankly.
And I know that there are projections all over the place, and that's part of the fun of it is trying to guess. Does Jahan Dotson to the Chiefs not only make a ton of sense? And listen, I am not a Chiefs fan, and obviously as a Steelers fan, I want to see the Chiefs drop down. But that just feels like such a natural fit.
It does.
And I almost already have Jahan Dotson in my mind. It's like, oh yeah, he's on the Chiefs roster. You know how sometimes it's like, and it takes me a while sometimes with guys changing teams. It's like, oh my gosh, I keep forgetting he's with whatever in my mind. So if he gets taken somewhere else, and obviously that could very well happen, it's going to take me a few months, I think, to get my mind around the fact, because in my mind, again, it is just such a good fit.
And they've got 2 picks there.
Yeah, and it just seems like such an obvious Chiefs pick to me. And I think Dotson would be very productive. I mean, I think he would be exactly what that team needs. Needs might be overstepping it, but wants. And I think would fill that void from Tyreek Hill very nicely. I'm not saying he's the next Tyreek Hill, but actually, I think in some ways he could be more productive over the course of the
he could certainly
long
flourish
term
in that offense
of catching the football consistently. So
I do think the odds of Jahan hearing his name called on Thursday night versus early on Friday seem to be trending pretty substantially in his favor because I've seen the Chiefs scenario in a variety of places, but one of the other places where I have seen him mocked way more often in the last just week that to me also makes a ton of sense, doesn't even let him drop to KC, is Green Bay. That is another team that badly needs wide receiver help.
For sure.
And a huge portion of their salary cap is now being chewed up by Aaron Rodgers. So they're going to have to improve that spot on the cheap. And the way you do that is you make a good pick in the first round at that spot, as the Minnesota Vikings found out with Justin Jefferson and the Eagles found out in the opposite direction with Jalen Reagor. But if you can hit big at wideout, if you're especially if you're a team that's in win now mode, has the quarterback who can make his receivers better and needs to be able to get bargain value at the wideout spot, no better way to do it than find a starter in the first round. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Dotson going to Green Bay.
And with the Steelers, it's one of those things now, after listening to a bunch of different people, other than running back, right? Like, I will be shocked if the Steelers take a running back in the first round.
That would be incredible.
That's not happening. Other than running back, though, there is not a pick they could make that would be like, I can't believe that they did. Like, there is a need everywhere on that roster, and there's nothing that's like an overwhelming, they have to absolutely address this. Like, quarterback, I mean, they have to address at some point in the next couple of years, but it's not like, they have to go get that first round. But if they like one of the guys that are there on the board and they're still there when the Steelers pick, which I think is a big if, but then again, that certainly is not going to be surprising, but I won't be surprised if they go secondary. I won't be surprised if they go linebacker, offensive line, wide receiver. I mean, there's not a pick they could make. There's individuals that they could pick, but I mean, in terms of position, there's not a spot other than running back that they would make that would not make some sense.
The interesting thing about this year's first round is that it runs very deep. There are, I think, probably about 25, maybe even 30 guys who I look at and say, that guy he'll be a starter if he goes in the first round. Yeah. Now, look, if some of these guys will end up washing out, they won't work out. Sometimes you go to a train wreck organization like Washington or Cleveland, and the whole situation works against you from the get-go. But I think the luxury for the Steelers is that they don't have to feel the pressure to reach for a quarterback, and they can get a quality starter at, like you said, probably 4, 5, 6 different positions. The only place where I would be a little surprised to see them go is at the interior of the defensive line. I don't know that there's going to, again, it's going to depend on how the first 15 picks go. Yeah. But I don't know that the value would be there to justify the pick. But I agree. They could take a safety. They could take a corner. They could take a linebacker. They could take an edge rusher. They could take an offensive lineman. They could take a wideout. And any of those spots, I just rattled off 6 positions that I could give you 2 or 3 guys who could realistically be available at 20. No need to take a trade up. And I'll throw out an interesting name for you, Ironhead. I'm curious to see what you think about it. But again, mock drafts going in this direction for whatever it's worth. But I've talked to a couple friends who are out there in Pittsburgh who have said that they think there is legitimate fire behind the smoke, and that's Desmond Ridder, the Cincinnati Bearcats quarterback, who again is probably a guy they won't have to trade up for. But you see Malik Willis go off the board at number 2 to Detroit. There could be a run, but you could definitely see Ridder being there at 20. And I am just keep seeing all over that Pittsburgh is legitimately interested in the guy.
Yeah, and listen,
too high, in my opinion.
I think, I don't disagree that it's a little high, but I think if you're the Steelers, right, like it depends how comfortable, I guess, that they are. Like, if you think this legitimately has a shot at being that franchise guy. And I don't think you have to feel like it's a guarantee. Like, oh no, we are 100%. We know this is the guy. I think with where the Steelers are at, and again, maybe I'm not viewing this the way that the Steelers are. My view is that they have basically, I don't think in that locker room and in the Mike Tomlin has not conceded the upcoming season, but I think the Steelers organization, the ownership, and the front office is looking to pivot here. And again, I think it's going to be a fairly short pivot. I mean, I don't think this is like a 5-year long-term rebuilding project the way, it is for like a baseball organization in that town where you're looking for a 25-year plan to get things to where you might be competitive again.
A 25-year plan to start the next rebuilding phase.
Yes, and then the rebuilding really begins. But listen, I think that this I do think this is a season that they are looking at as we can play around a little bit.
They do not have the same sense of urgency that the Rams did to start this season.
For sure, yes. And so I think, again, if there's nobody that you're absolutely in love with at any of the other positions, mm-hmm. And again, I also think if, Ritter's nice, but boy, this guy we think could be, a fantastic edge rusher or the next great receiver, and we think some other people are missing on just how good these guys are. Like I said, I don't think you have to be locked in on anything, but I think you can take a bit of a risk in my mind. And I think 20 for Ritter is too high. But listen, you're hoping that you land that next magical guy that makes that transition. And quarterback is as much as any other position, right? It's just, Tom Brady obviously famously goes in the 6th round. The number of busts that have been taken with the number 1 overall pick, it's a long list at quarterback and other, top 5 picks at quarterback. So that risk reward thing, again, I think when you're not looking at this year being, a make or break type of season, again, to me, I think you're looking at it as, hey, let's see what happens. And if Ritter is a guy that, in talking to and in your evaluation, you're like, no, I think this could be a franchise guy. Again, I don't think you have to be guaranteed, have it in your mind that this is absolutely, and if it doesn't work out, we're ruined. But I think you can take a flyer in the first round on a guy that you think has the potential to develop into that franchise quarterback for you.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this a lot. The risk-reward calculus of going quarterback in the first round has changed a lot because of the rookie wage scale.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes a quarterback attractive in the first round is you get that 5th year of team control. So if you take a quarterback and you hit on that guy, you then essentially have a 4-year sprint to the finish line to try to take advantage of his rookie salary to bring in as many vets around him to make a Super Bowl run. And that's the model that you contend with in the NFL anymore. It's not the build the steel curtain decade-long franchise model. And it's just not. And not even New England really had that. New England lucked out in a variety of ways. They had a great coach. They had a generational quarterback who also happened to be married to a supermodel who was the earner in the household, which allowed him to probably give the team a couple of hometown discounts where they could go out and sign some more free agents and build out the roster. And even then, they got lucky hitting on some guys they were able to bring in. And lucky in games, right? I mean, I bring this up all the time. Adam Vinatieri doesn't make 2 crazy kicks the first Super Bowl year. If Pete Carroll hands the ball to beast mode against the Seahawks, I mean, there were a lot of moments along the way where even the historic success, consistent success of the Patriots was Not because they built a juggernaut in the way that the 49ers did in the 80s or the Cowboys did in the 90s.
And Brady's own admission, he's like that the whole that tuck roll game. I mean, it changed the trajectory of everything, right? Like he might not have even been the starter the next season if not for that
fair question.
turn of events that. At the time, nobody thought was the right call, or at least was the right role. And again, Brady, that I think that was an E60 thing too, right? Where they talked about that game and how it's just incredible the way moments change the course of history in sports and throughout and. Oftentimes it's just something by chance or something that, again, just a little luck that goes one way or the other, for or against, and all of a sudden the fortunes completely change. And so we'll see. I would not mind, speaking just for myself, because I do like Red. I liked what he did with the, hard not to if you're a college football fan. How that translates to the NFL, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know enough about the kids, internal fortitude, work ethic. I mean, I presume he has a good work ethic, but there's just so many things that go into making that transition to the next level. Some of which, again, are not in your control, but it does feel like the Steelers, with what they have on that roster right now. I think Ritter has a couple of years that they can work with him.
Sure.
And hey, let's see if he can develop. And at some point over the next couple of years, right? I mean, you have enough good football minds in there, you're going to be able to say, okay, this is a guy that's going to be a nice backup for a long time. We still got to look, or holy cow, we hit the jackpot here, and this is our guy. And I think they'll know that internally within a season or two. And that's the other thing is that you don't have to. The nice thing about it is you have a couple of seasons to buy for him to learn, and which I still think is the ideal. I mean, I know more and more guys are thrown into the fire right away, and there is some advantage to that, but. I just when you look at Aaron Rodgers and even Tom Brady, I mean, it doesn't have to be a long waiting period, but I think having time to sit back, see how the system works, see and learn from some of the veterans, get a better feel for the locker room and all that stuff. I do think the ideal situation for any quarterback is still to have at least a half season, if not a season or two, where you're not the starter, and you can kind of get that feel and make that transition. And I realize not a lot of teams have that luxury when they're drafting a quarterback out of need. But I think that is the ideal situation. I think it's a situation that the Steelers could afford whoever, if they take a quarterback in that first or second round even this year.
Other than quarterback, what would you say their biggest need is right now, positionally?
I still think that they've got to get the offensive line figured out.
I figured that's what you were going to say.
And I don't know that I think they've got to make some they might even have the right personnel there. I just don't know they have the right personnel in the right spots. But it feels to me, I think they need another guard for sure. I
think it's Kenyon Green is the big interior lineman who's projected to go middle to late first. I've seen him projected to the Steelers several times.
Yeah, I mean
that's like a boring, offensive line, but that's how you build a winner, man.
Oh, there's no question. And you look at the great Steeler teams over the years, and
line of scrimmage out, right?
For sure, where it has started.
I still think Linderbaum, the center from Iowa. I mean, I know you guys took the center last year, but he could probably kick out to guard.
Yeah, and that's
right?
that's
I just think about a franchise that has had a Hall of Fame center more often than it hasn't, which is It's just insane to think about. Like,
but,
I mean, I guess if it's from the merger onward, I'm talking about.
Yes.
Pittsburgh has had a Hall of Fame center more than they haven't, which is just wild.
It is, and it's
and I love that kid. I love the way he plays. I
do too.
Even though I don't know that I buy the value that early in the first round, I still don't know that I don't want the Eagles to just take him as Jason Kelsey's replacement and just be set with a guy who I think is going to be an absolute mauler at that position for at least a decade.
Yeah. No, I
and he just looks like the kind of kid that you could imagine becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah.
Tyler Linderbaum, I'm talking about.
Yeah. No,
Penn State fans will remember him pushing us around pretty good this past season. Although, man, just as an aside, God, how frustrating is it how well PJ Mustipher was playing him until he got hurt? God, but just everybody remembers Clifford getting hurt. Man, Mustipher getting injured in that game. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I'm sorry. To hell with that kid. Whatever. If he's wearing midnight green or black and gold after next Thursday night, maybe we'll feel differently, but he's still the enemy right now.
Real quick to circle back to the E60 thing last night. I did not. So I missed like the first 3 minutes of it.
Okay.
So
probably the most riveting 3 minutes of the whole thing, I would guess.
But the way the rest of it played out, I'm guessing that and if I'm wrong about this, I'll own up to it. But the two things, my two takeaways from it were, and I know it was only an hour, and this is there are so many layers to every aspect of this that there was no way in an hour you could cover it. It was just so superficial, and they didn't. It was, in my opinion, just a waste of time. And I don't mean in terms of viewpoints or anything else. They didn't get into any element of it. It was like just a rehash of the headlines from 10 years ago. And I suppose I was trying to imagine if somebody hasn't, you just remember vaguely the headlines and you're not, a Penn State fan and you're not, I don't know what would have really drawn you in here. And I don't know that anybody anywhere would have learned anything new. And they just left a lot of stuff just hanging that, again, if you have followed it at all, and certainly as closely as many around here did, it's like, well, yeah, but you need to follow that up with this. And again, maybe unfair in an hour. I just don't know. I guess at the end of the day, I'm not sure I'm understanding what the point of the show was, because I don't. Again, they didn't uncover anything new. There was no. I don't know. There was just nothing compelling about it. And the bigger takeaway for me, and again, I admittedly missed the first, I'm guessing it was about 3 minutes. I just was getting the kiddo to bed, and I knew it was on, and I wanted to watch it. And by the time I got back downstairs, it was a couple minutes in. But I don't think that the biggest component of that story, what made that a national story, was Mike McQuarrie and they didn't, at least in the final 57 minutes or so of the show, didn't mention Mike. Now, if they did at the very beginning, again, my apologies. Maybe that could have been those first 3 minutes.
Who knows?
But I don't think they touched on that, and that is fairly amazing to me. And again, if they did in that first couple of minutes, and then the way the rest of it flowed, I don't see. It seems like that would have tied in at a couple of other places later in the show. And again, I don't know exactly how they opened up, and so I admit that I just missed it. But that to me, if you're going to do a story on anything regarding the paternal legacy and what happened at the end, like the Mike McQuarrie element has to be examined, and a little more than the surface level that they did all of the other stuff. It just, again, to me, it was not very interesting and not all that well done, and it was just kind of a big for me at least, a big shrug of the shoulders. I felt like it was just a waste of time, and I'm not really sure why it was even done. And again, I'm not like I genuinely just don't understand what they were at this point. 10 years later, to me, if you're going to do anything on it, like dig a couple of layers in. Like they mentioned the free report, but no analysis of. I mean, they mentioned that the Paterno family didn't think it was effective. They mentioned that Sandusky is appealing.
I'm curious on the point about the
not getting good defense, but nothing about, hey, these are some of the points.
Right,
like,
this is what he said.
And again, I don't know. I realize you can't go through the whole thing, but how about mentioning the fact that, for example, give at least an example. For example,
on the free report bit, especially, I am curious, was there any acknowledgement at all of that follow-up report that the alumni trustees had produced?
There was, but again, it kind of
just reported that they did
it. It was, they talked to Jay, and Jay, basically. Jay said, well,
Louis Free said this, and people had opinions about it. Well, moving on.
Yes, and that was basically it. And that was really throughout the whole thing. What one guy has an opinion that, Joe Paterno was, an awful person and hid this knowingly, and another person thinks he's a saint, and then they have, of course, the reasonable person. He was neither a sinner nor a saint.
You are not breaking my heart that I decided to watch the.
No, I've had a couple
Raptors
people. No, I've talked to a couple people. I'm like, honestly, and it's not even because. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily hit piece, or it certainly wasn't a propaganda piece. But I just don't. It just, the disappointing thing for me was that there was just nothing in depth on any level of the story.
Yeah.
And at least in the part that I saw, and again, I saw all except for I think it was about the first 3 minutes. In what I saw, at least, there was no mention of Sarah Ganem or Mike McQuarrie. And I just don't know how, when you're talking about the Paterno legacy or anything surrounding that scandal, that you don't at least touch on those two and questions raised about those two individuals. I mean, Sarah Ganem is a Pulitzer Prize winner who has vanished from journalism. I mean, she's teaching, but I mean, when somebody is that young and wins that big of a prize, the expectation is, right, that they develop a Woodward and Bernstein type of career. That ain't what happened, kids. And there's a reason that didn't happen. It was a story that was completely fed to her, and she just ran with it. And that is... there were many things that got me a little fired up watching it. But in the overall scheme, at the end of the day, again, it was like, well... I just don't know, again, what the point was. And I think they were trying to be fair and balanced and trying to present all sides, but they just didn't. They did nothing but scratch the surface on any of it. And I just don't know that it provided a service to anybody.
Well, because
at the end of the day,
I seemingly wisely chose to read a bedtime story to my daughter, and then watch the 76ers in the playoffs. I did not watch this, but as you know, Ironhead, I am, if nothing else, a man of the people. I am truly Happy Valley's Vox Populi, right?
Yes,
so
indeed.
I went to Twitter this morning, and I said, full disclosure, I did not watch a minute of this thing. I retweeted my co-host Kevin Horn's reaction, which I trust Kevin's opinion on these things implicitly. What was his
reaction? I'm curious, because I respect Kevin a lot.
I will quote what Kev said exactly, and I texted with him a little bit during the broadcast, so I was getting his thoughts, and this is pretty much a summation. He said, as I scroll down through a couple of my retweets here. By the way, John Bruno absolutely belongs on the list of the top 100 college punters of all time.
Yes.
He said that was, shockingly, anodyne, as good as could have been expected, even. And that was pretty much it. That at ESPN, you're expecting a hit job, and instead you just get something that at the end is a net do no harm. And again, based on the expectation that, you're talking about, why don't you get into depth? Why don't you scratch the surface of the story? Why don't you give us information? You throw those expectations out the window.
Fair enough.
You come to this and say the optimal outcome is we come out of this unscathed, and then you work your way down from there. I think that was his point. And so I asked people, what was your reaction? And I kind of mostly the responses have been similar, that they were bracing for much worse than they got. There wasn't a whole lot of substance to it. I think there were still some people who felt it was, not very well produced. I heard that from that. Several people made the comment.
I would agree with that.
Especially for something they've apparently been working on for months, because they had poor John Barr at James Franklin's press availability, and in between talking about who's got a sprained calf and what Purdue's offense is or whatever, they what do you think about the legacy of Joe Paterno? And they expect he's going to do anything other than blow him off, which is what he did. That's another situation that I have just found interesting watching the discussion of it online, because clearly I do know ESPN made an overture to the athletic department. Can we get a sit down with James on this topic?
Yeah.
And he said no. We don't have enough time left in the broadcast today, Ironhead, for me to analyze why I think he said no, but maybe that's a discussion for another day. But he said no. From a journalist's perspective, I understand why Barr had to try what he tried, because that's his job. And I'm sure he had an editor or a boss, chirping in his ear. They're not talking to us, just crash his press conference. They have to let you in. They have to let you talk. You're ESPN. But there was no way in that format you were going to get any kind of a reasonable answer. So it was just lose-lose for everybody. I can't believe for a moment John Barr, who is a pro, I think he's a good reporter. He didn't want to go to James's Wednesday press. It wasn't even a real press conference, and ask him about the legacy of Joe Paterno while he's standing on the Holuba Hall turf. I mean, that's totally insane. He didn't want to do that. There was no chance Franklin was going to answer the question. And how could you? Even if he was inclined to answer, which he clearly was not, as you're sitting in that little circle of reporters with the 6-foot social distancing and the whole 9 yards, in between a question about injured players and the the running game stinking, you're going to wax eloquent on the legacy of your super controversial predecessor who you don't like talking about because you have a nagging insecurity complex. Oh, I guess I did get into it a little bit. Anyway, just zero chance. It was just everybody lose all around. I sympathize with James. I truly do. I sympathize with John Barr. The correct thing to do would have been to just say, we requested to sit down with Coach Franklin, and the request was denied, and that's it.
I agree with that. I also, I think there are several reasons that James Franklin is not going to address it. And listen, one of them is, he is, the head coach now. You're dealing with, recruits that you're trying to bring into the program, and parents that you're trying to bring in. And because, right or wrong, and it's wrong, Joe Paterno's name now nationally, even locally, there are very mixed, varied, and in some cases heated opinions. Yeah. And no matter what he says, if he gives them the highest praise, there are going to be people that will hold that against him and use it. And, obviously if he criticizes and, it doesn't, that wasn't handled well, I mean, so that you either are going to get slammed nationally, and even if you try to nuance it, there's no win there. Can
I give you
James
a super
Franklin.
Controversial hot take of mine?
Yeah.
I do not need to have my opinion of Joe Paterno validated by James Franklin.
Yeah.
Honestly, at the end of the day, if that guy privately thinks Joe was a fraud or a scumbag or whatever, I don't love that, and I do imagine that attitude might leak into his day-to-day in ways that would make his life harder at Penn State, but I don't care. To me, Joe set a standard for a long time. You can say without a doubt that the brand of Penn State football, the culture of Penn State football, isn't what it is without Joe Paterno, because he was such an imposing figure for so long. And a lot of that is really important to me. And if James maintains those standards, and I would argue recent results on the field notwithstanding, body of work, he has really done an impressive job of doing that. That's the most important thing to me. So I don't need to hear him come and talk about how much he loves Joe Paterno to make me feel better about myself or my alma mater or the program or my opinion of Joe. So anyway, I get tired of talking about it.
Yeah.
And I am sure he does too. And I think, as I alluded to earlier, I think James could probably learn to be far less sensitive to this stuff, because I say all the time, who gives a crap what the media thinks? We're morons. The fans are by and large morons, and I say that as fake media who is also a super fan. Okay, like dumb. Who gives a crap what I think, James? Truly. I don't even know why anybody listens to or watches any of this stuff I do. I guess they find it entertaining. I hope. You make $8 million a year. You have better things to do with your time. Truly, like, who gives a crap?
Yeah. Yep. And but it's also in today's environment, right? Like, you are smart. I mean, I'm with you on the caring personally, but you're smart to be monitoring what is out there. I mean, monitoring as a program, not necessarily the head coach spending.
Don't sit and read Mike Poorman's article every week, James. Truly,
but yes, but I think finding out. Hey, there's criticisms of this player, or there's just so much going on now that you need to at least have your ear to the ground, right? On, okay, wait a second. It's getting out there that this or that, we need to get ahead of that and address it. And again, that stuff is just getting more difficult for coaches and programs to stay ahead of, with all of the name, image, and likeness. And I mean, it is much harder to control. Well, it's not harder. It's impossible now to completely control the messaging, right? Because these kids can get out their own stories, and you can't. There was a time where you could stop it, and one of the ways you could stop it is, listen, if you send this stuff out, you're not playing. Well, the player is going to say, okay, I'm heading over to Michigan. I'll see you next year, or maybe later this year in your stadium, and I'll be fired. So it's just a whole different dynamic. And again, it's that dynamic is forever changed here when it comes to intercollegiate athletics, and especially in football and basketball. That is going to wrap up today's show. We'll talk a little bit more about the blue-white game and what we're looking to see. Most important thing I'm looking to see is friends. Getting out and tailgating and having some fun.
First time since 2019 that we have had a regular old blue-white game.
Yeah, and that's just...
It's nice.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, and it is something that I am looking forward to, and also looking forward to a better weather for the blue-white game than we've had over the last 48 hours.
2 inches of snow or whatever the hell just happened here. Unbelievable.
Absolutely absurd.
Good Lord.
We will talk to you again on Thursday. Until then, be good and be safe.
Go Sixers.
Best 2 out of 3?
It's one fantastic ride. The turbocharged, tech-inspired new Kia Forte.
There's always something happening at Quaker Steak Lube.
From live music to exciting new flavors, meet your friends and refuel at your local Quaker Steak and Lube today. Can't slow down? Then order online. Pick up and get back on the road. Find us at thelube.com.
You know, we humans have come a long way on our journey. Our first language wasn't exactly, a language. Medium well, thank you. Our first vehicles weren't the fastest.
Can you,
Faster. Hey, boys, punch it! Our first maps weren't that accurate. And you know, fellas, the world is actually, give a ball. Our first phones weren't smart. Text mom winky face emoji. Our first screens, you couldn't touch.
Mom, Dad's feeling the TV.
No one likes a snitch, son.
And the first electric vehicles weren't, let's just say, they look nothing like the first ever Ioniq 5. I mean, two-way charging, AR heads-up display, 300-mile range. What can't this thing do? Look, the point is, it's been a long,
yeah, good point. Really long journey.
but worth it. Your journey at its most evolved, the fully electric Hyundai Ioniq 5.